Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of My Black is Transnational. And I have on here today a special guest joining us all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. I have the pleasure of being able to talk with Miss Molly Jansen, who is the CEO of Afripods, which we're going to learn a lot about. The number one podcast platform for Africa and Africa's content creators, which I'm hoping that we can be able to jump on ourselves. So looking forward to learning a little bit more about Molly and just the transnational experience that you have to share with us, along with just being a boss and being the CEO of one of the upcoming platforms for us, by us. And so thank you for joining the show, Molly. Welcome.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And hi, everyone who's listening at home or in your car.
Awesome. All right. So before we get into it, usually I give this long-winded intro, but because of the sake of time and just giving you the opportunity to talk a little bit more, if you want to just tell your listeners, tell everybody just who you are, where you rep, anything interesting about yourself before we get into our conversation.
Hey, everyone. So my name is Molly. I am raised in New York. I grew up there. I went to school in DC, and I've lived in Kenya for the last 4 years. My mother was born and raised in Ghana. My dad is from the States. And I really, really, really enjoy working in digital media and audio on the continent. I think something that you might not know about me is that I played soccer in college and I really enjoyed travel. I just went to Nigeria last week, and that was my 10th African country. And I feel very privileged to live and experience Africa as a continent in my late 20s and early 30s. How's that?
That's off the chain, right? That kind of leads me to then segueing into the question of what was your upbringing like? I mean, you're all the way in, you're living in Africa now, right? And this podcast really focuses on just talking about that transnational experience and how you go from one place to the other and how you leverage both. But before we get into that aspect of things, let's start from the beginning. What was growing up in New York like as a Ghanaian American, trying to figure things out in New York City of all places?
I mean, so I grew up in Westchester County.
Oh, okay, I
But,
got you.
you know, we definitely spent a lot of time experiencing New York City, whether it was for events or for school trips. And then as a young adult, I lived on 23rd Street on the east side. And most recently, before I moved to Kenya, I was living in Harlem on 130th between Lenox and Adam Clayton Powell. So I have definitely experienced the city. I love the city. And it's quite a different experience being on the continent, specifically in Kenya. Um, there's a lot I like, and there's a lot that I find challenging. I think from the likes, there's a convenience about living here that I never really experienced in New York. And I recognize that's because I have more privilege here than I would in New York, right? So I can afford a housekeeper a couple times a week, or if I wanted to have a chef, I could go to the spa. I think the cost of living is lower here than it is in Harlem or Westchester, for instance. And that's definitely a benefit. The most significant challenge for me is community and the people I love, and missing these major life experiences that happen in your late 20s and early 30s, whether it's people getting engaged or married or having kids or going on little weekend trips. That's kind of unfeasible when a direct flight is 13 hours from me.
Mhm.
So I've more good than bad. I've definitely been incredibly privileged. I'm grateful to have the experiences I have and see what I've seen, but I miss my people a lot.
Mm. So how do you often retain and maintain connections? Like what are your usual devices or mediums that you use to just stay connected to your community all the way back in the States?
Well, connection, in my opinion, is paramount and fundamental to our existence and enjoyment of life, if I can say that. I think that you need people to co-regulate, for instance, like a hug makes you feel better. There's science that tells you that your body calms down, you feel cared for, you feel supported. And for me, it's not that I don't have people in Kenya, it's that I don't have my people in Kenya.
Right.
And I think that's a big difference because, the grocery store I go to, they say hi to me when they see me in the morning, or the greengrocer, or the coffee shop, or the people who work in the office that I'm in, or my colleagues. My Pilates class, people have familiarity with each other. I have familiarity with people. I do have relationships, but it's that next layer that I'm missing where I can just go to my best friend's house, or I can go to the place that I've been going to for the last couple of years, or my spot. I miss that a lot. And so the way that I keep in touch with people, I try to do these phone calls. It's difficult when you're 7 hours in the future, but I make time for it. And I have even started doing something where I put calendar invites on my friends' calendars once a month or twice a month, where it's recurring. And I have a touch base with my friends. I'm actively involved in community building in my life with those I care about. And I think, especially in this window of time, people are changing a lot. They're moving, life events are happening. So when you have something on a calendar and you're as busy as I'm sure you and I and some of your listeners are, it's nice to have something to look forward to. It's nice to be able to let your hair down with someone you haven't talked to that knows you, that you love, that you care about. So definitely phone calls. I make time to video chat. There was a running joke that I would only post on Instagram when I was upset because I would get so much engagement. I would get so much love. I would get the most hilarious comments and DMs from my friends hyping me up. There's nothing like your people having your back. And so you would see this really beautiful moment of me, and then you would see all these comments. And I remember, I was a cool girl in the coolest city in the world. You still got it. Life changes you, your experiences changes you, but you do have people that care about you, even if in this moment you feel lonely. And the pandemic didn't help anyone, did it? I mean, we were literally isolated by design through this quarantine experience, which was new to me and I'm sure new to most people.
Yeah. But I mean, like that to me, I find that fascinating because I think about, even adding the founding factor of the pandemic and what that is, right? But like thinking about leaving and give or take, you can kind of clarify for me, but what would we consider your comfort zone? And then, traveling to, 13-hour flight to Kenya and kind of living there, and although it's pluses and minuses, but then going through the pandemic and doing all of that while still trying to find ways to retain that connection. I mean, it's one of the things that kind of inspired this podcast, because there are people who do this, who've been doing this for years, right? Who take everything and they move to a different part of the world, but they're still trying to maintain connections. They still retain some form of identity and closeness to where their roots, quote quote. And so, like, I'm curious to know how and why digitized media, why focus on African content and African stories, and why live in the continent.
Well, everything is digital now. Businesses are looking into digital transformation in a significant way. And I think specifically when it comes to the continent, there's such a strong audio culture. Sound is so important. Stories have been told orally since the beginning of time. African history really hasn't been told by African people before. Additionally, radio has been quite powerful on this continent, as is the digitization of radio, and podcasts are picking up tremendously here. So it makes a lot of sense to step into something that allows you to memorialize culture, language, and identity, frankly, and help people do that. I think that Afripods as a platform has a really massive opportunity, and we're a hosting platform, right? So we statistics, and essentially what we're able to do then with data is build out that advertising funnel for audio on demand to show that African content is valuable and important and deserves to be compensated. And I think that we give information to the creators for them to advocate for themselves in front of advertisers, for us to advocate for advertising on their behalf. And it allows us collectively to build this ecosystem together. I feel very privileged to work in this space among who I consider pioneers in digital audio on the continent. And I'm excited to see what everyone does together, and I'm excited to be part of it. So that's why digital media and digital audio to me matters. When it comes to why did I decide to live on the continent, my mom is from here. Well, not Kenya, but from the continent. And also, and not for nothing, the United States is definitely having a moment right now. My lifestyle here, like I mentioned earlier, is a little bit more convenient and easy. Definitely the work is hard. Like what I'm doing is massive from work. That's hard. I even dream of work. But when it comes to living here and exploring somewhere new and being surrounded by people of color, primarily Black people on this continent, experiencing the vibrancy firsthand from diversity of thought, opinion, art, people, clothing, it's a privilege. I feel like I'm getting to live when I'm here. And I feel like none of that should be taken for granted. So being here has given me the opportunity of my lifetime thus far to see new things and enjoy new things. However, I also recognize that the experience I have is not the experience everyone has. Like my mother even told me the Africa you live in is not the Africa I lived in. And it's interesting to hear that, but I don't take it for granted at all.
Yeah. So growing up in Westchester County, growing up in New York, was this something you ever imagined yourself doing, saying, hey, you know what, when I get older, I'm going to move back to Africa? Or was it just something that, just
And
kind
run
of
a
happened?
podcasting company?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I did. I'm not even sure if I knew what a podcast was. I'm certainly sure I didn't know what a podcast was at the time. It's interesting when people ask, well, what did you want to do as a child? I actually don't really remember. I've always cared about people. I've always wanted to be a kind person and surrounded myself with kind people who are curious about the world around them. I think traditionally I've looked at a job as a way to fund my lifestyle and make money. I never really subscribed into like the work mentality that people are so set on choosing to be part of their identity. I've always wanted to contribute to the world around me in a meaningful way. And I feel very lucky that I really believe in the work that I'm doing. And I don't know how many people get the opportunity to spend a significant portion of their lives and days doing something that they think is important and pushing something forward that they feel can have value and impact. It's why I take this job so seriously. It's why I dream about it. I can't even get away. It's because I care. And I think that when I was younger, growing up in the suburbs, I mean, my parents, my mom and my dad, they enabled me to do anything I could. And I mean, maybe my anything scope was much smaller as a child. I never went without, but I feel like most children don't have any concept of going with or without. They either feel good or they don't. And I know I felt good. And I will definitely say, as an adult looking back at my life, I was extremely privileged. I got to travel significantly even when I was an infant, right? I think my first international trip, I was 6 months old. I started traveling internationally by myself when I was 8, like only from the US to the UK, because that's where my
Those
grandparents.
unaccompanied flights, I know about with the little thing around your neck.
Yes,
Yeah.
unaccompanied minors.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
doing that. And
I
so
did them
I
too.
saw so much. Like I had experiences in that way. And I don't think I could have seen this in a million years. I think if you told me this, I would have, if you were going to tell me that, when you grow up, you're going to be an executive at an exciting media company and you're going to help people change their lives and help them make money. And you're going to inspire people to look at something in a different way, I'd be like, wow, I can't wait to do that.
Yeah.
But the specifics of it, I couldn't imagine that.
Yeah. So then how do you balance as a Ghanaian American? How did you balance or what was your cultural experience like in having that exposure to African American culture or just American culture and Ghanaian culture? Like, were you eating wache, like, or you eating like kenke, and then some days and you mix it up, and another day you had some soul food? Like, what was that experience like coming up and having that multicultural, experience?
So it's interesting. My father is the American and he's 1 in 4, and all of them somehow married different ethnicities. So I grew up with a lot of different types of cousins, okay? And on my dad's side.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was culturally exposed from a young age. Like my closest cousins in distance and in age are Persian American. So I remember going to their house and having, tadig, which is the rice where it's browned slash burnt nicely,
Yeah.
crisped on the bottom, and you flip it over in different types of stews and sauces. And my mother didn't really make a ton of West African food. She makes incredible stew,
Oh, yeah.
spicy, more spicy than I think anyone can imagine. And we definitely had a lot of rice. But I think I grew up in a very Americanized household.
Mm.
And I don't think I had the true immigrant experience that a lot of people have. I also didn't grow up in a two immigrant household, right? So
Right.
that's different. And I think as I got older, I remember one year going to a game night for the first night of Kwanzaa because Umoja means togetherness, I
Yeah.
think, something like that. And so my friend hosted a game night, and I had never done anything for Kwanzaa. It was not something that we celebrated.
Yeah.
And I found it so interesting. And I was like, I never did this before. My mom wasn't making mac and cheese or fried chicken or collard greens or traditional Southern Black American food, for instance. I didn't experience that culture growing up. And I had a lot of friends that did in Westchester. I grew up in White Plains.
Mm.
But I didn't. So I kind of navigated my youth in a really blissful way. And I say that because I think I was pretty ignorant to what the experiences were like for someone who had lived in a primarily a cultural household, like a household with two immigrant parents,
Yeah.
or someone who had Black American parents.
Mhm.
I had friends that had both, but it was different. I always knew I was Black. I always recognized I was a Black person,
Yeah.
but I kind of saw myself, even in my adulthood, as a Black woman who has a white father,
Yeah.
because no one has really confused me for a white woman yet.
Mm.
So, I mean, we're waiting for that day to change how I feel about my identity. But especially with, the protests that were happening and this massive reckoning and recognition that Black people's lives matter and that they've been discriminated and racism is rampant, etc. I felt very privileged to recognize my place, and also I think a little bit oblivious as a child as to the difference of Black American households and immigrant households and what the mix of both looks like.
Yeah. It's interesting because we have some similar upbringings in terms of like international travel and just that notion of having very multicultural familial ties, right? Like I have so many cousins that are tied to so many things. And even when I think about my connections to Ghana, to Nigeria, to like Brazil, like it's so many ties that I've had growing up that I've learned so much. But then, when I think about what you're describing, it also seems like I would consider this a luxury to some extent, but it also seems like you got the luxury of not necessarily getting exposed to that conversation that commonly happens in Black spaces, which is the African and African American, that I wouldn't call it dispute, but the historical tension that kind of exists in conversations that happen where it's who is who did what to who, or why is there this you did this to me. There's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of tension that kind of has fired between both groups that kind of lead to dissension intraracially. And or if that has that ever been your experience? Because for me that was like I can't as soon as I immigrated here at a young age, around 8, and growing up in Chicago, at a very I initially didn't really understand the whole concept of, just racism and all the other things that I've learned now. But a very important part was just coming up being told from many community members in the African immigrant spaces where it was stay away from them. You're not them. yeah, we are African, they are not, right? And so um I had to kind of navigate through that. And I wonder if that is something that you've ever caught wind of or you were completely sheltered from.
Oh, I mean, I wasn't oblivious to the world. Like,
Well, no, I mean not that, but you didn't have to necessarily, was it something that you didn't have to encounter like on a day-to-day basis, right?
not on a day-to-day basis, no.
Right.
But I mean, since since I can remember, my mom always has braids or twists in, and it's
Mm.
always going to the African braiding shop, or it's having the woman come to the house. I actually stopped wearing braids in middle school, like cornrows. And then when I came to Kenya, it was when I got box braids for like the first time in 12 years. It was
Wow.
crazy. It was, yeah. And for those who are listening, instead of watching now, I have braids in my head right now that go down past my waist for those who care. Braids all day.
Yeah.
So I grew up and had, I want to say that's just like a Black experience, for instance, for women having braids. But I definitely was in the African braiding shops at a young age. That's what we were doing. I
Yeah.
think that I cannot remember having the conversation of being different than Black Americans or African people. I know that my friends who grew up in the same county as me did because we recently talked about it a couple of years ago, and I was shocked that they had experienced something so different, and they were shocked that I experienced something so different.
Yeah.
I also grew up playing sports and doing a lot of activities. So I think I was exposed to a different type of world. Um, Also, I was a young girl. I think that young boys get a little bit of a different conversation, but I could
Mm.
be wrong.
Mm. Now, let's kind of fast forward a little bit, all right? And so you've grown up, you've moved to Nairobi, and you're CEO as a Black woman in Africa running a company. What is that like?
It is such an incredible feeling.
Mm.
I feel like I've made my parents proud. I'm a firstborn, I'm the first African grandchild.
Mm.
I I definitely feel like I had a little bit of resistance moving to the continent. The people that didn't give me resistance were my parents.
Wow.
Everyone else questioned it. But my mom was like, okay. She didn't even ask me why. She just said, okay.
Wow.
And my dad was like, yeah, I'm so excited for you. And I felt so supported in that. I remember when we got to the airport, my mom was a little bit frazzled. My bag was like 2 pounds over the limit. She was like, let me just put her in business class. It's cheaper when you upgrade at the gate. And I don't fly business class regularly. I'm not that type of person. But I was like, Mom, it's 2 pounds. I'll put on the extra sweaters. You know how it goes. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
let me get my suitcase, let me get my stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that moment, I realized that she was a little nervous for me. Like she left at 18, she went to school, she had me at 21 in the States. And I'm very, very proud of her. And my dad, I mean, he's incredible. He's so smart. Like I have parents who really love me and who are really proud of me. And
That is incredible. And this is, I mean, and this is what it's about, right? And so, I mean, I'm glad you kind of talked about going back to Ghana because I was going to ask about that later on, but that being able to connect all of that and kind of create that timeline and look back at it it's one of those things that that sometimes it takes your breath away because you're just like, wow, like my people did that. Like my moms did that. And you salute the courage, the bravery to really just be able to get on a flight, and you talk about life-changing things, having a baby, making that travel, trying to figure out like what's the next move. I'm in this country with people who don't look like me as much, and I got to find my community. I got to figure it out, and to be able to do that, I mean, this is noteworthy and remarkable. Now I want to talk quickly about that fear because you speak on something that I think is very interesting when you said that the least resistance was from your parents, where most people would think that is your parents that would have the fear. I know for a fact, when I have conversation with people about the idea of just going back to Africa, is like, what, bro? Like, like, are you serious? Like, why would you do that? Right? Like, we got electricity here. Like, we got water here. We got, we got the social media's popping here. Like, we ain't got to worry. We got 5G, 10G. Like, what is happening? Right. And so I know,
They got
huh?
electricity here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, so tell us, right? Tell us what it's like. Tell the people, because there are lots of people who listen to this podcast who may who are, I would say, gradually learning that Africa is not much to be scared of. I think that, and I think you mentioned it about what your mom said. The Africa I grew up in, not the Africa you're growing up in. So, can you talk a little bit about that and share that? Because you mentioned it a little bit about some of the perks and like the cost of living, but I think we can unpack that a little bit more.
Well, I think you're right that a lot of people would potentially experience resistance from their family members. I will say I did get some looks. They just didn't verbalize them. And I am lucky to be unequivocally supported in the ways that I make significant decisions in, right? So maybe I won't make the best decision for lunch, but moving across the world, I think my family knows that I can be trusted with decisions, and also knows that what I know about my family is we have each other's back. Everyone's family got issues. Let's just put that on the table. Ain't nobody's family perfect. Not yours, not yours, not yours. And I know that they have my back. I know that if anything happens, I can ask, but I also feel very independent and capable. When it comes to living on the continent, what I told my friends when I first moved was I live like a wealthy woman in Westchester.
Wow.
And that was how I explained it. I was like, that is,
Wow.
because, that's what we knew, right? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, no, no, no. Like my housekeeper comes twice a week. I'm one person. I got a 2-bedroom. It's under $800. I have an incredible balcony and view. I can go to the farmer's. I can go to the grocery store and I don't have to look at the prices. There's tiers of wealth. I forget what the tiers are, but I know one of them is like, can you grocery shop and not look at the price? And I'm there. Like,
ooh.
I also like vegetables are so cheap. They're so affordable. And so, or inexpensive, I think is a better word to say, but you can get a week worth of vegetables for less than $20 and eat significant vegetarian plant-based meals every single meal for a week. So, I mean, the luxury I've experienced in this country and even on this continent, but I'll speak specifically on Kenya, unparalleled. The Kenyan coast is incredible. The Indian Ocean is beautiful. The bush going on safari is magnificent. I mean, honestly, I'm spoiled for choice. That's the expression. And I'm so grateful I get to experience this now. I've been on so many safaris. Can you imagine? I can say that I've been on so many safaris. That's crazy. And I think that it never gets old. I'll tell you, it doesn't get old seeing a zebra or seeing a lion or seeing a giraffe. It's incredible. And I think somewhere like this, which has an incredibly vibrant cosmopolitan and city scene in Nairobi, but there's so much to do outside: mountain, bush, lake, hiking, desert in the north, beach. It really is an outdoor person's paradise. And I feel like that's just good for your nervous system, frankly. So my lifestyle here, I don't really indulge in all of those amenities that make my life more convenient, which maybe I should get into. I have a housekeeper twice a week, but I do a lot of self-care activities. And I think that because there's such a interesting impact of Indian people in Kenya, there's a lot of holistic healthcare. So I've done cupping, I do Pilates 3 times a week. I get reflexology. I've done, massages, and I get to take care of myself in a very luxurious way, which to me is the epitome of luxury. I take care of my body more than I would be the type of person to buy luxury bags or designer clothes. That's just not my version of luxury, or maybe it's not the version of luxury that I'm not at that level of luxury. I'm at optimize my life and optimize my body. And I invest a lot of money into do that. I get therapy every week. I've had a life coach. I've talked to a psychiatrist before. There's nothing wrong with, taking care of your body, mind, and spirit collectively together. So my luxury is in my care.
Yeah. I mean, yo, that's dope. And I think for those listening, this is what we've talked about in many instances, or discussed, where that fear of going back to Africa, it's not that bad. People show you how to live life if you really, really want to understand wealth and like.
Oh, wait, I don't think they're living life elsewhere. Now that I've lived here, let me tell you, life is not just going to the office every day. It is being off is being off. I mean, the reality of it, if we want to shake the table a little bit, is that this modern 9 to 5 work structure is based off of, I think it was like the Ford Model T, like that time frame, whatever president was in there. We haven't even worked 9 to 5 for 100 years. Why do we think it's the only way? Like, people are getting more sick. Stress makes people sick. It puts more of an impact on the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. I mean, I have an autoimmune issue as it is, and my dream is not work, which is why when I said earlier, I want to contribute to the world around me in a meaningful way. I don't want my brain to turn into mush. I want to be able to critically think and solve problems. But the concept of work that exists specifically in America, even more specifically in New York, that should not be anyone's dream. You are not living. You are not. There's more to see on this incredible planet that we get to live on. And it really is incredible. Like, I was in Costa Rica with a girlfriend of mine last December. We had points, so we went for free, and it was a last minute trip, and it was so incredible. But we went on this tour on some water somewhere, and we were in the Nicola Peninsula. It was a bioluminescent bay. It was no moon. And I remember on this boat, it's a protected park. There's no buildings anywhere in Costa Rica, in a bioluminescent bay with no moon. And I remember being on this boat thinking, this planet is incredible. There's so much to see. Like, there's so much to see. And I know we get lost in the day to day, but living, whether it's loving up on your people or seeing something new or eating something incredible, that's living. Contributing to the world around you, that's living. But don't get twisted in that 9 to 5 being the only way to live, because I will have you are absolutely mistaken on that.
Yeah, there's so much, man. I'm not even going to add to that, because that's it right there. That's the tweet. And I think, real quick, before we start to wrap up, I want to talk a little bit more about Afripods, and I just want to talk about what you all have going on and just what you all have planned for the future and the growth of it. I can only imagine that you being able to run this company, this podcasting company, where we're just talking about stories, and we've just kind of, been building around the idea of how natural storytelling is to Africa and Africans. And I wonder just how much experience you've gotten just interacting with all things Africa by working and running and leading this company. And so how does that influence the continual development and growth? Because you've gotten so much exposure now. You're traveling to these different countries. You see their different awards, different innovative new things that are happening for Africa by Africans in terms of media, digitized media, and all things related. And so like how is that impacting you running the company and its potential direction?
Sure. That's a great question. I mean, I have barely scratched the surface on this continent. 1.3 billion people. That's a lot. And each
Yeah.
country is different.
Yeah.
Each country is different, has its own nuances, culture, languages, dialects, food. I have seen a lot. I've not seen that much, but I've seen a lot. And I think what is constantly reinforced to me is that you don't know enough. If I'm being totally honest, that's after all that I have seen in my life, what I know is I don't know enough. What I know is I don't know it all. And I think that's what keeps me going, because as soon as I recognize I don't know it all, that means I'm going to learn. And there's no way to learn it all about any continent, in my opinion. But I'm going to continue to explore the things that fascinate me. I'm going to find someone who knows more about something that I don't know so that we can uncover it together. A great example is Francophone Africa. I think it's the most vibrant opportunity on the continent. I read this incredible article that talks about how the coast of West Africa, from Abidjan, Lomé, Cotonou, Accra, Lagos, that whole area. And I know that Accra and Lagos aren't Francophone, but looking at that region and the impact is going to be so significant over the next 50 years. And then you look at this, I think it's 13 countries that identify as Francophone. I could be wrong on that. But you look at these countries and I don't know much about any of them. And I know that they're creating so much exciting content and there's so much value there and there's so much culture. So what I know is that I don't know enough and I need to find someone who knows more than us. And I know that we need to recognize these people. I know that they need to take up space. I know that their voices are just as valuable. So when I was invited to be a guest editor in chief of a magazine called Tap, I did a takeover and we got 80 contributors across 18 countries and made sure we even had a small French section, which I fought for with the editor, because even if we don't understand, that does not mean that it's not valuable. It means it's not for you. That's all that means. There's so much in English, the stuff that's in Swahili or Creole or Zulu or Arabic is valuable. It does not have to be in English for you. And I think that's something that I've really stood 10 toes down on, that I don't know everything. And there's no way I'm going to know everything, but there are people that know more than me. And I want those people around me. And I want those people to be curious. And I want to highlight as much as we can of this incredibly vibrant continent, especially when it comes to audio, especially when it comes to digital, and especially when it comes to opportunity in the tech space. And I look at my position as one of many to open doors for more people, right? It's not, none of this job is about me. And I'm very, very grateful for that position and ability. And I hope that I'm doing right by at least one person, because one person is enough. You change one person's life, you've done something incredible. Imagine being in a position to change thousands of people's lives by giving them an opportunity to make money off of their content in whatever platform you're in. Imagine being a platform that has content that inspires a new generation of whatever they do because they chose to listen to your platform that had content from a different creator. I mean, imagine someone reads the magazine that I helped edit. That's such impact. And so I think for Afripods in the future, what we'll see is more podcasters, more listeners, more advertisers, more visibility for the podcasters, more expansion in different countries, more reach, more languages. And I would like to say it really lays in more is more, right? We're going to see growth, but more is more.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, you definitely talk as far as impacting, add me to one of those people. Because for sure, learning about Afropods and being exposed to it was definitely one I was like, wow, like I wish, and I definitely need to be involved in some way, shape, or form. So even being able to do that is definitely one you can add me to that. All right, some quick hitters, really quickly, just for people to learn a little bit more about Molly Jansen. All right, so favorite food.
Ooh, Indian. Oh, no, Italian. Sorry,
Italian too.
Italian.
Yeah. I love Italian food. Favorite Italian food. What we talking about?
I love pasta. I love cacio e pepe, and most places do it wrong. I
I
also
love
love
pasta.
pesto. I love pasta. I
I love
love
me some
pasta.
pasta,
It's so
girl.
good.
I love
They went
pasta.
off,
I love pasta. Ooh, I can
man. They
definitely go
went
for
off.
some lasagna too. That's definitely my thing. Love lasagna.
Lasagna and pasta. That counts. That counts.
Ooh, but man, yeah, that's my thing. People be like African food. Like, no. I mean, listen, that's by nature, but like Italian food. I just had this conversation with my daughter. She's trying to figure out she thought I love like Chinese food. I was like, girl, no. Throw me some
Italian
pasta
food is gonna hit it every time.
every
Every
time. Every time. God, with the sauce. Yeah, okay. All right, cool. Um, favorite music or favorite type of genre?
It changes. Right now, I've been listening to a lot of Black classical music, but my favorite for real is probably, if I'm being honest, outside of Beyonce, it's soca music. I
Okay.
really like soca music.
Okay. All right. And then so favorite hobby when you're not working or you're not, doing anything related to the gig.
Right now, it's Pilates, but my all-time favorite was soccer. I was a goalkeeper.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And then as far as favorite book.
Favorite book? Interesting. Huh. Growing up, I always think of it. I always think of the Harry Potter series because that was like the first book I really got into.
Me too.
But you know, I've been reading a book. The woman who is the COO of Stripe uh she just wrote a book. It just came out. It's kind of like a how-to with business. It's called Scaling People.
Hmm.
It's really good. I haven't even gotten through it. It's like a workbook, but it's massive. So I would say right now, Scaling People, but all time, definitely Harry Potter. And unfortunately, J.K. Rowling is really vocal about things that I wish she wasn't as vocal about, and also on the wrong side of history about. But that was the first anthology, if I could say, of books that I read.
From beginning to end. Yeah. I remember being forced to read Harry Potter and then realizing that, okay, this isn't like my mom got me a book and she was like, you need to read this book. And I was like, okay. Because she's like, you played a video game too much. Okay, fine. So then I got the book, read it, and I was like, I'm not going, I need all of it. All right. And so I'd be remiss because I know people will be like, why didn't you ask this? So favorite African dish.
We're going to do this. You're Nigerian, huh? You
Oh,
really can
we
do
need to
this.
do this. We can
It's
do this.
gonna
I
be
can.
jollof rice. It's gonna be jollof rice. But I will say, so jollof rice is, I can eat the rice by itself. I really
Yeah.
could. My mom's stew is the best thing I've ever had in my whole life. It's probably incredible. But if we're talking about best African cuisine,
Mm.
Senegal. Senegalese food is ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It is a fan favorite. Everyone likes it. It's incredible. Everything is amazing. I highly suggest Senegalese food if people haven't had it. It's so good.
I
It's
haven't
so
had
good.
enough. I haven't had enough to make any judgment or comments about it. But people, you are one of the, I think you were probably like the fifth person
Oh,
who
Senegalese
said
food
like
goes
Senegalese
far.
goes crazy. And I was
Oh,
like, are you serious? It's like, yeah, I'm like over Ghanaian food, over Nigerian food, me and my
as
biases.
a cuisine,
Yeah,
as a
I know.
cuisine.
As a cuisine, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Absolutely.
wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You get them around some fish, they know what they're doing. They put some chicken, the yassa with the onions, they know
Mm.
what they're doing. The rice is spectacular. The pepper is hot, but they also do savory dishes. Anyone can eat Senegalese food. And if you don't like Senegalese food, I'm very curious because I've never heard that before. I
I
mean,
gotta try it. I gotta try more of it because I've had the rice and that's been cool, but I haven't had
the lamb
anything.
is incredible. DB is incredible. The brochette, like the skewered meat, everything. Senegalese food, you can't go wrong. You can't.
Yeah. Oh my God, yo, this has been fun. All right, my last question as we wrap up is, and you touched on it again, so if it's being redundant, then edit it out, whatever. But what do you want your legacy to be? I always ask that.
I want people to, well, I hope that the legacy I leave people that know me and potentially people that don't know me is that people believed that I cared.
Mm.
That is the most important thing to me. The creators matter, which is why I keep them as my North Star, which is why I'm able to speak about this so passionately. My community matters to me, which is why I schedule these Google Meet calendar invites to chat with them monthly. I want people to look back at my life and know that I cared about them and know that I truly, truly wanted what was best for them and that I was kind.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. I know you got a somewhat busy schedule, but you have a well-balanced life. And I just want to thank you so much on behalf of my Black is Transnational for jumping on the show. Molly Jansen, again, CEO of Afripods. And please be sure to check out Afripods. We just a variety of different podcasts based on African stories and different African podcasts. And best believe you'll find my Black is Transnational on there as well. How can people follow you if people want to keep up with you? Are you on social media? How do you interact with people who want to learn more about you?
Sure. Well, the best way to reach anything with podcast related or work is probably at Afripods, at afripods.com. My social media, I'm not so active. The best place to find me is LinkedIn. So Molly Jansen, Jensen. And for Twitter, it's MJ Akosua, but I'm not so active. So don't look for me on social. If you do, go through the business. Otherwise, if you really want to connect with me, LinkedIn is probably the best way to do it.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much again for jumping on the show. Really appreciate it. And we just are looking forward to all the great things you're going to be doing with Afripods. We wish you nothing but the best success. And of course, my Black is Transnational, we are now avid fans of you all.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being one of our true fans. It's truly my honor to sit here with your listeners.
All right, Molly Jansen, thank you so much.